Welcome to the Economic Autopsy. Please step inside.
It's quiet in here.
Watch your footing. It is a little cold in here today, but that's to be expected given the nature of our work.
It is sterile, clinical, just the way we need it to be.
We are not here today to hype up the next big consumer gadget. We aren't here to breathlessly discuss the latest social media app that, promises to revolutionize how you waste your time.
No, this is different.
Today, we are pulling back the sheet on a body that is currently lying on the slab. The date is February 11th, 2026. And the patient was once royalty.
The king of silicon, that's what they called him.
Intel Corporation, the company that literally put the silicon in Silicon Valley. For decades, they were the heartbeat of the digital world. If you owned a computer, you didn't just own a machine, you owned a vehicle for Intel's intelligence.
Intel Inside.
It wasn't just a marketing slogan, was it? It was a statement of fact. It was a guarantee of performance.
It was a guarantee of dominance. For, a solid 30 years, they were simply untouchable. But today, looking at these charts, the vital signs are erratic. And that's putting it mildly.
Erratic is being very polite. We're conducting a forensic examination of a corporate body that is fighting for every single breath it takes. Just look at the chart I've pinned up here.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
We are talking about a company that has been unceremoniously kicked out of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. I mean, think about that for a second. Yeah. They were a member of that exclusive club for 25 years. And who replaced them?
Nvidia,
which is poetic in a very, very cool sort of way.
It's the whole story in one transaction, really.
It is. We are looking at a valuation erosion of over $100 billion. That is simply staggering. You don't lose that kind of value by accident. You don't lose that kind of value because of, a single bad quarter.
No, and that's just the financial surface trauma. Underneath that, the organ failure is. It's systemic. We're seeing massive layoffs estimates ranging between 15,000 to 30,000 people. Globally.
Wow.
The dividend, which was once this reliable paycheck for grandmothers and pension funds all across America, has been suspended, just gone. The cash flow is hemorrhaging.
So the driving question for this deep dive, the question we are going to try to answer with this autopsy, is simple, but, it's terrifying. How did a company that essentially held a monopoly on the future manage to lose it?
And more importantly, is this patient dead?
Right. Is it a zombie being kept alive by government machines? Or is it a sleeping giant about to wake up and remind everyone who built this industry in the first place?
To answer that, we have to look at the toxicology report first. We have to examine the trauma of the AI revolution they completely missed. We have to understand the life support systems provided by the taxpayer.
And finally, we have to look at their last breath, the manufacturing node that they're calling 18A.
Everything hinges on that.
Okay, let's pick up the scalpel. Let's start with the toxicology report. Because you don't just lose $100 billion in value overnight. This wasn't a sudden heart attack. This feels more like decades of slow poisoning.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And if we look at the blood work here, the most prominent toxin is something economists call financialization.
Financialization. Okay, it sounds like a buzzword you hear on, cable news. Let's unpack that. Companies buy back their own stock all the time. Apple does it. Microsoft does it. Why is it a toxin in Intel's case?
Context. It's all about context. If you are a software company with 90% margins and you have more cash than you know what to do with, sure, buy back your stock, return money to shareholders. It makes sense.
But Intel isn't a software company.
Not at its core, no. They're a manufacturing company. They are in the most capital-intensive industry in human history. They need to build factories, fabs, that cost $20 billion each.
So every single dollar they send to Wall Street is a dollar they aren't spending on the new factory or the new research lab.
Exactly. We've got extensive documentation here from an economist, William Lozanic, who has studied this specifically with Intel. He argues that this wasn't just bad luck or, a market cycle. It was a structural choice, a deliberate addiction.
Let's look at the numbers because they are honestly shocking. Between 2001 and 2020, so the first 2 decades of this century, Intel spent $128 billion on stock buybacks.
Let that number just sink in for a moment. $128 billion. That represented 64% of their total net income during that entire period.
64%. And that's before we even talk about dividends. What happens when you add in the dividends?
When you add in the $68 billion in dividends, Intel returned nearly 99% of its net income to shareholders.
Wait, say that again? 99%.
99.
I want to be absolutely clear on this. For every single dollar of profit they made inventing the literal future, they gave 99 cents back to Wall Street and kept a penny for themselves.
Essentially, yes. And this is so crucial to understand. In the semiconductor industry, cash is oxygen. It's not optional.
Right.
You need it to secure the best talent, to buy the newest lithography machines from ASML, to build these insanely complex clean rooms. By funneling that money into buybacks, which, let's be honest, essentially just pumps up the stock price in the short term, Intel was looting its own future. They were looting what Lazonic calls their reputation bank.
It's like selling the furniture to pay the mortgage, but you're telling everyone you're remodeling the house.
That's a very, very apt analogy. And this mindset didn't just affect the bank account, it infected the engineering culture. You can trace this all the way back to the netburst architecture in the late 90s.
Oh, I remember netburst. That was the Pentium 4 era. I remember those things running incredibly hot. My old desktop could heat the room.
Right. Because the marketing department wanted higher frequency numbers. They wanted to be able to say 3 gigahertz, 4 gigahertz, because that's what sold computers at Best Buy. It was an easy number for consumers to understand.
Bigger number means better.
Exactly. So engineering was forced to chase clock speed, which is good for the stock price because it's easy to sell, rather than efficiency or actual innovation. The result was chips that ran hot, used way too much power, and were ultimately a dead end. They were prioritizing the marketing brochure over the laws of physics.
And once you start ignoring the laws of physics to please the marketing department, you're on a very slippery slope. And that hubris, that belief that the stock price dictates engineering, led to a series of missed turns that are honestly painful to look at in hindsight.
The biggest one being mobile. This is the moment where the timeline really splits for them.
Okay, set the scene for us. We're talking, what, roughly 2005, 2006?
Correct. Apple is working on a secret project, the iPhone.
Huh?
Steve Jobs needs a processor for this new device. He needs something powerful but incredibly power efficient because, it has to run on a tiny battery. Naturally, he goes to Intel.
Of course. They're the best in the world. Who else would you go to?
So Apple comes to Intel's CEO at the time, Paul Otellini, and offers them the deal of the century. Build the brain for the iPhone.
And Otellini says no.
He says no.
Knowing what we know now, that sounds like pure insanity. Why? What was the logic?
It was a spreadsheet decision. Plain and simple. Apple wanted to pay a very low price per chip. Intel was used to selling server chips for thousands of dollars and PC chips for hundreds. Otellini looked at the volume Apple was projecting, looked at the low margin, and decided it wouldn't move the needle for Intel's bottom line.
He didn't think the iPhone would sell enough units to make up for the low price.
He was maximizing quarterly profits instead of securing the next great computing platform.
And that single no created the modern world for everyone else.
It really did.
Yeah.
Because Apple couldn't just stop. They went to Samsung, and then eventually they went to a company called TSMC, Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company.
And that's the key, isn't it? By rejecting Apple, Intel didn't just miss an opportunity, they actively funded their biggest future competitor.
100%. It allowed TSMC to gain the volume and the expertise to become the giant they are today. Intel effectively funded their own executioner by turning that deal down. TSMC used that massive volume from the iPhone to refine their manufacturing processes year after year until they eventually surpassed Intel.
But it wasn't just bad business deals, right? I mean, Intel is a manufacturing company. They build things, and for a very long time, they built them better than anyone on the planet. They had this tick-tock model.
Like a metronome. It was relentless.
Tick, a new manufacturing process. Tock, a new chip design. Tick, tock.
And that metronome stopped ticking around 2014. This is what we call the manufacturing meltdown. Specifically, the 10-nanometer disaster.
10 nanometers. Okay, this seems to be the moment the wheels really came off. I hear this referenced all the time as the beginning of the end, but what actually happened? Why was 10 nanometers so hard for them?
It was classic overambition without a safety net. Intel tried to introduce too many new technologies all at once. They got greedy with the physics.
What do you mean by that?
Specifically, they tried to change the material they used for the interconnects, the tiny wires inside the chip that carry the signal. For years, everyone used copper. But at these tiny scales, copper wears out. It suffers from something called electromigration. The electrons literally push the copper atoms out of the way over time.
So they needed a new metal.
They chose cobalt. On paper, cobalt is great. It's more durable. It doesn't degrade as easily as copper. But there was a catch, a big one. Cobalt conducts electricity poorly compared to copper. has a much higher resistance.
So they solved the durability problem, but they created a performance problem. The signals moved slower.
Exactly. The chips ran hot, they were slow. And on top of that, they also tried a new transistor contact method called contact over active gate, or KIA. They were trying to shrink the chip aggressively to save money and increase density.
It sounds like they were trying to hit a home run when a single would have kept them in the lead.
They were trying to hit a grand slam with no one on base. And here is the fatal error. When it didn't work, when the cobalt caused issues and the coag yields were terrible, they didn't have a backup plan.
Nothing.
They didn't have a simpler, less ambitious version of 10 nanometer ready to go.
They were all in.
They were all in, and so they were stuck. For 4 years, while they desperately tried to fix these fundamental physics problems, they were stuck just refining their old 14 millimeter process, adding plus signs to it. 14 millimeter plus plus, 14 millimeter plus plus, 14 millimeter plus 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 plus. It became a joke.
And meanwhile, TSMC.
TSMC didn't take those risks. They took a much more conservative, iterative approach. They breezed past Intel to 7 nanometer and then to 5 nanometer. By the time Intel finally got 10 nanometer working properly, the rest of the world had completely moved on.
That is just a masterclass in how to lose a decade-long lead. But that brings us to section 2 of our autopsy, the trauma. Because while Intel was busy fixing its self-inflicted wounds in manufacturing, a meteor was heading for Earth.
A meteor called artificial intelligence.
And Intel didn't look up.
Oh, they looked up. But they were looking through the wrong telescope. They were looking at CPU central processing units. You know, the traditional brains of the computer that do logic. They thought AI would just be another workload for the CPU to handle.
But AI doesn't need complex logic, does it? It needs massive parallel processing. It needs thousands of simple cores working at once. It needs GPUs.
Graphics processing units. And that brings us to what we're calling the BlackBerry moment. We have a leaked quote here from early 2026 from the current CEO, Lip-Bu Tan. It's sobering.
It's more than sobering. It's devastatingly honest.
He said, and I'm quoting here, 20, 30 years ago, we were really the leader. Now I think the world has changed. We are not in the top 10 semiconductor companies.
Pause on that for a second. Not in the top 10. This is Intel, the company that literally invented the microprocessor.
And he explicitly admitted on the topic of AI training, it is too late.
Too late. That is a phrase you never want to hear in a hospital, and you definitely do not want to hear it in a corporate boardroom. It implies terminal decline.
It acknowledges reality. You simply cannot catch Nvidia in training large models right now. It's not possible. Nvidia is worth $4 trillion. Intel, at one point, considered buying Nvidia for $20 billion.
That statistic just hurts my soul every time I hear it. $20 billion. They could have owned the entire AI revolution for what is now pocket change for that company. Why didn't they do it?
It's the same reason as the iPhone. Hubris.
Yeah.
They thought graphics chips were for video games. They were toys. They didn't see the scientific potential, the parallel computing revolution that was bubbling up in academia.
And now the moat isn't just the chips themselves, right? It's the software. It's CUDA.
Explain CUDA for us.
Yeah.
Because this is the real barrier to entry. Why is software the thing that's stopping everyone else?
Okay, imagine you build the best, fastest, most efficient engine in the world, a true masterpiece of engineering. But all the mechanics in the entire world only have toolkits that fit a different company's engine. That's CUDA. Nvidia spent 20 years giving away their software, their tools, their libraries to universities and researchers for free.
They built the ecosystem from the ground up.
So now every single AI researcher, every data scientist, every PhD student learns to code on Nvidia's platform. If you try to switch to an Intel chip, you have to rewrite your entire code base from scratch. It's a nightmare.
And Intel has tried to fix this, haven't they? With things like One API and Habana Synapse.
They have, but it's like trying to get the whole world to suddenly start speaking Esperanto when everyone already speaks English. It's technically possible, I guess, but the friction is just immense. The inertia is all with Nvidia.
So if they've lost the training market, the building of the AI brains, what's left? Are they just giving up on AI entirely?
No, and this is the crucial strategic pivot that we are seeing in 2026. They are conceding the high-end training market to Nvidia. They're essentially saying, fine, Jensen, you build the Ferraris.
So what does Intel want to build?
Intel wants to build the Camrys. They're focusing on inference.
Okay, explain that distinction for us. Training versus inference.
Think of it like school versus work. Training is the university education for an AI. It takes months. It requires massive supercomputers, thousands of NVIDIA GPUs, and it consumes unbelievable amounts of data and electricity. You are teaching the AI how to think. That is Nvidia's turf.
Okay, so that's the hard part.
Right. Inference is the job you do after you graduate. It's using that education to perform a specific task. When you ask ChatGPT a question and it gives you an answer, that's inference. When your car's camera identifies a slope sign, that's inference.
And since there are way more cars on the road than there are universities.
Exactly. Intel is betting that inference will be the massive volume market. You don't need a supercomputer in your pocket to run a chatbot. You just need a reasonably powerful, efficient chip.
Which brings us to their new Gaudi 3 chip we're seeing in all these reports.
Right. And notice the marketing pitch for Gaudi 3. It isn't "we are the fastest." It's "we are cost-effective." They claim 80% better performance per dollar than NVIDIA's old H100 chip.
So they're not trying to be the best, they're trying to be the best value.
They are trying to be the value option for companies that don't need to train a new GPT-5 from scratch, but just want to run a customer service bot or analyze sales data.
It's a humble position for a king, fighting for the scraps of the value market.
It is. But survival requires humility. However, humility doesn't pay the bills when you have these massive, multi-billion-dollar fabrication plants to run. And that leads us directly to the life support system.
The money.
The money. Because despite all these failures, Intel is still here. They haven't gone under. And a big reason for that is Uncle Sam.
This is where the story gets really dark and, frankly, pretty political. We all know about the GPS Act.
Yeah.
Originally, it was about grants. Billions of dollars in government money to help build factories here in America.
Right, the whole Bring Manufacturing Home initiative. The idea was to secure the supply chain so we aren't completely dependent on Asia, especially Taiwan.
But by late 2025 and into early 2026, the narrative changed. The patient wasn't responding to the medication. The grants weren't enough to stop the bleeding. So we are seeing reports now that the federal support it's mutated.
Mutated how?
It's no longer just free money. It's an equity stake.
Wait, we're talking about the government taking ownership in Intel.
Yes. Reports indicate the administration, and sources are pointing to the Trump administration in this 2026 timeframe, converted a significant portion of that funding into a roughly 10% equity stake in the company.
That sounds like, that's nationalization.
Semi-nationalization. It's a move you usually see in a banking crisis, not in the tech sector.
Yeah.
And it raises this massive, massive question. Why? Why would a free market administration do something like that?
Because they have to.
Exactly. Intel is too big to fail. Not financially, perhaps. Wall Street seems to have already written them off. Yeah. But strategically, for national security, absolutely. You look at Fab 52 in Arizona, that factory is intended to be the primary facility on U.S. soil capable of making leading-edge chips for the military.
For fighter jets, for satellites, for intelligence gathering.
All of it. So if Fab 52 goes under, or if Intel is forced to liquidate,
the U.S. national security apparatus is fundamentally compromised. We cannot run the U.S. military or our intelligence agencies on chips made in Taiwan, an island that China claims as its own sovereign territory. It's a geopolitical impossibility.
So Intel has become a ward of the state, a defense contractor masquerading as a consumer tech company.
Effectively. And this creates this whole zombie debate. Is this a bailout? And you have to look at the human cost. While the government is pumping in billions of dollars of taxpayer money,
Intel is firing those same taxpayers. 15,000 to 30,000 people let go.
That paradox is just brutal. Taxpayers are funding a company that is simultaneously firing taxpayers.
And can you imagine the atmosphere inside that company right now? We've seen the Reddit threads from verified employees. They're grim. One description really stuck with me. Hell given physical form.
It's the little things that signal the end of an era. I read about the coffee.
The free coffee, yeah.
Yeah. It sounds so petty to focus on coffee when billions of dollars are at stake. But in tech culture, that's a huge symbol.
It is. For decades, free coffee and snacks was the bare minimum perk of working in Silicon Valley. It was a signal. It said, we want you to be comfortable here so you can focus on innovation.
And when Intel cut the coffee budget to save cash,
it screamed desperation. It tells the engineers, the people you're counting on to save the company. We are counting every single penny, and your comfort is a line item we can no longer afford.
When you lose the culture, the engineering usually follows. If the smart people leave, the government money doesn't matter. You can't print innovation.
No, you can't. But, and there's a but here, there is one faint pulse left on the monitor, one last hope that the engineers who stayed behind are clinging to.
The 18A process node.
The last breath.
We keep hearing this term, 18A. It stands for 1.8 nanometers. Why is this specific technology the do or die moment? Why is this the hill they are choosing to fight and possibly die on?
because it represents a potential leapfrog. Intel isn't just trying to catch up to TSMC with 18A, they are trying to jump ahead of them. It relies on two miracles of engineering that TSMC hasn't fully rolled out yet.
Miracles. Okay, we should use a few of those. Let's break them down. What is the first one?
The first is called power via, or what's more technically known as backside power delivery.
Okay, visualize this for me. What does that mean?
Imagine a city. In a traditional chip, the skyscrapers, those are the transistors, sit on the ground, and all the power lines and the data cables hang above them in the sky, in this massive tangled mess.
Okay.
The power has to fight its way down through maybe 15 layers of data cables just to reach the transistor on the ground.
That sounds incredibly inefficient. You'd get signal interference, right?
Massive interference and resistance.
Yeah.
You lose a lot of power just trying to get it to the destination. PowerVia takes all those power lines and buries them underground. It moves them to the back of the silicon wafer.
So the data is on top, clean and unobstructed, and the power is delivered from the bottom.
Exactly. It cleans up the signal on top, and it allows for much thicker, more efficient power delivery from the bottom. It's a brilliant idea, but manufacturing it is an absolute nightmare because you have to grind the silicon wafer down until it's unbelievably thin to expose those wires on the back.
Okay, that's one miracle. What's the second one?
Ribbon FET. This is a brand new transistor structure. It's a type of gate-all-around transistor.
We've had FinFET for a long time. What's the difference here?
So imagine a garden hose. That's your flow of electrons. A FinFET transistor is like pinching that hose from three sides, the top, the left, and the right, to stop the water. But you still get some leakage at the very bottom where you aren't pinching it.
Okay, makes sense.
Ribbon FET surrounds the hose completely. It's a gate that goes all around the channel. It gives you perfect, instantaneous control over the flow of power. It turns on faster, it turns off faster, and it leaks way less energy when it's off.
So PowerVia and Ribbon FET. If these two things actually work as advertised, Intel theoretically has the best transistor technology in the entire world.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
And as of right now, February 2026, the signs are, well, they're surprisingly positive. The new CEO, Lip-Bu-Tan, reports healthy defect density. He's quoting numbers below 0.4.
Translating that from engineered to English, is that good?
That's manufacturing grade. It means they can make these chips without having to throw half of them in the trash. The Panther Lake chip for laptops is booting. It's reportedly in production.
So the technology works, but here is the skepticism I have to inject. Can they sell it to anyone else? Can they convince other companies, their own competitors, even to use their factories? Because Intel has a history of being, well, arrogant.
We do it our way. Yeah.
Can they really become a service company?
That is the foundry gamble, and it's a huge one. They claim they have 12 active customer engagements. We know for a fact Amazon is doing a custom Xeon chip with them. We know Microsoft is building something called Maya on 18A.
But the big fish, where are Apple, Nvidia, AMD?
They are all still with TSMC. TSMC holds 64% of the global foundry market. Intel's barely a blip on that map. And there's bad history here. Broadcom reportedly tested an early version of 18A and walked away.
Yeah.
They didn't like the yields they were seeing back then.
Trust takes years to build and seconds to lose.
And Intel lost it for a decade. Winning it back with one good process node is a very, very tall order.
And they're doing this weird shell strategy, right? I saw photos of the new fabs in Arizona and Ohio. They look empty.
It's an accounting survival tactic, really. You build the shell of the factory, the concrete, the roof, the HVAC systems, but you delay buying the actual tools, the scanners, the etchers, the lithography machines, which are the most expensive part, until you have a signed customer order in hand.
It saves cash, a lot of cash.
It saves cash, but it creates this really weird situation where you have these empty cathedrals of technology just sitting there, waiting for a congregation that maybe hasn't arrived yet. It's a little spooky.
Let's talk about the people at the top for a minute, because organizations are really just shadows of their leaders. And we have a tale of two very different CEOs here, Pat Gelsinger and Lip-Bu-Tan.
The dreamer and the surgeon.
Pat Gelsinger. He came back in 2021 like a savior returning home. He was an Intel guy to his core. He worked under the legendary Andy Grove. He had all the catchphrases, kick the tires and light the fires.
He was a true believer. You could tell he loved the company. His strategy was IDM 2.0. He genuinely believed that if he built the factories, the customers would come. He spent billions. Ohio, Arizona, Germany. He wanted to do 5 nodes in 4 years.
Which, as we've already discussed, is an absolutely insane pace.
It was frantic. And ultimately, he ran out of runway. The losses were just too high, $16 billion in Q3 2024 alone. The board lost its patience, he was ousted, he tried to do too much too fast, while the core business selling PC and server chips was cratering under pressure from AMD.
And then enter Liputan, the surgeon.
A very, very different energy. He took over in late 2024, early 2025. He's not promising the moon, he isn't quoting scripture or rallying the troops with slogans. He's saying, this is a marathon, not a sprint.
He's the one who stopped the blank checks for the fabs.
Right. He's focused on what he calls smart capacity, building what's needed, not what's dreamed of.
And he's the one who gave that brutally honest quote we mentioned earlier, I am not in the top 10.
That's the surgeon speaking. You have to diagnose the cancer before you can treat it. Gelsinger was trying to run the race with a broken leg, telling everyone he was going to win. Tan is acknowledging the leg is broken and he's putting it in a cast. It's painful, it's slow, and it's not inspiring, but it's the only way to heal.
So, doctor, we've looked at the toxins, the trauma, the life support systems, and the leadership. What is the prognosis? Section 6, the verdict. Is the patient dead or alive?
It really depends on which chart you look at. Let's start with the bull case, the resuscitation scenario.
Okay, give me the hope. What's the best case scenario here?
The hope is 18A. It works. It's real. Panther Lake is shipping. And then the market shifts in their favor. If AI moves from the data center, where Nvidia rules, to the edge, your laptop, your phone, your car, then Intel has a real chance.
Because everyone already has an Intel-powered laptop. They have the distribution.
Exactly. If the future of AI is running smaller, efficient models on your local device, Intel's CPUs and those new Gaudi chips have a massive, massive built-in market. They don't have to beat Nvidia in the cloud. They just have to win back the desktop.
And of course, the government won't let them die.
Correct. We have to call that the defense premium. The U.S. government simply cannot and will not allow TSMC to be the only option for advanced chips. Intel is the national insurance policy against World War III. That floor is solid rock.
Okay, now for the other side. Give me the bear case, the inevitable collapse.
The financial toxicology is just too deep. They are out of cash. That 10% government stake is just the beginning of the dilution. The prevailing speculation on the street is that Intel will inevitably have to split, a breakup. Intel Design, the people who actually design the chips, spins off and becomes a fables company, just like AMD or Nvidia. They can then build their chips at TSMC if they want, which would immediately make their products more competitive.
And Intel Foundry, the factories.
It becomes a government-backed utility, a zombie fab that makes military chips and whatever else it can get, kept alive by tax dollars. It essentially becomes Amtrak. It runs, but it doesn't make money, and it certainly doesn't innovate at a global pace.
And there's a technical wall they're hitting too, right? Something about memory.
The memory wall, yes. AI needs a special kind of memory called HBM high bandwidth memory. Intel doesn't make it. They have to buy it from companies like SK Hynix and Samsung. And right now, there is a massive global shortage of HBM.
So it doesn't matter how good their chip is if they can't get the memory to pair with it.
Exactly. If you can't get the memory, your amazing AI chip is just a very expensive, very useless piece of silicon. And they have no answer for that bottleneck.
So we are left with a company that is no longer the market leader. It is, for all intents and purposes, a national project.
The days of dominance are gone. The patient is stable, but critical. They are fighting for relevance, not for supremacy.
It's a sobering thought. You know, I'm looking at my laptop right now as we speak, and it has that little Intel sticker on it.
Most of them still do.
And I have to ask myself, am I using a piece of technology or am I using a piece of history?
That is the question, isn't it? And here's one more thing for you to chew on as we close the file. If Intel essentially becomes a government-owned utility for making military chips, if the king of silicon becomes a ward of the Pentagon, is that a failure of capitalism, or is it the ultimate victory of national security?
Does the free market actually matter when the stakes are geopolitical survival?
A question for another deep dive, perhaps. But for today, the chart is updated, the prognosis is guarded.
Indeed. Case files closed. This has been the Economic Autopsy.